Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about writing about intercultural conflict. Now, this is something that can come up in many different settings, including business, in education, in counseling, but we're going to be looking at one particular assignment involving an international cultural exchange and looking at a sample assignment from the conflict management program. Now, if you are new to the ACU Online Writing Center, we not only offer webinars like this that delve into specific writing tasks and specific assignments, but we also offer resources such as templates to help you with the paper formatting, appointments where you can sign up for feedback on your writing, email answers to questions, as well as a large archive of webinars such as this, all of which you can view online. Most of our students who come to us for writing feedback will sign up for an asynchronous appointment or a real-time phone appointment by going to our schedule, by going to my.acu.edu under Resources, selecting the Online Writing Center, and following the instructions from there. You can sign up for an asynchronous appointment, meaning an appointment where you schedule time. By the time that rolls around, you upload a copy of your paper, and we'll look at it and send you feedback, generally within 24 hours. Or sign up for a real-time phone or Zoom appointment where you, again, schedule time, and then we speak with you in real time. And so you get your feedback then, and you can ask questions back and forth. Now, what you prefer depends usually on your schedule and whether you want to have a back and forth conversation or kind of get more of a bird's eye view and be able to digest the feedback on your own time. And that's totally a matter of preference. Many students will go back and forth. If you have a more long-term arc or long-term goal, so you're trying to build up your writing skills, you're working on a dissertation project, then there are some longer things that we might set up. But the best way to start that conversation is to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, and we'll talk and figure out what will work best for you. And if in doubt, you can reach out to us via email. All right, so I do want to call your attention. We have an awful lot of webinar recordings, and so you're probably looking for a specific assignment for your program or looking for a specific task. So if you scroll down on our schedule, after the semester calendar of webinars, you'll find that we have a sorted guide by program, and there you can find your specific program and any course tie-ins for that program. All right, you'll see us referring to our APA course paper template later, and with that, let us dive into our main objective, which is to understand these tasks for resolving intercultural conflict through the lens of CONR 603's Week 6 assignment. Now, this is coming from the Negotiation Principles and Practice program, and it's fairly advanced in the term. So there's certain expectations that are applicable for a Week 6 assignment for this course that may be a little bit more strict or just expecting more than in earlier assignments, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this particular assignment, it starts with reviewing a case study, a published case study from the textbook Negotiation. And this particular case involves a cross-cultural situation where an American teacher teaching English in Japan is asked to endorse a book. And then we have a number of larger dynamics at play that give Scott a dilemma, and some of this involves the complexity of many things beyond just this job. And so this is something where it's not just one person that's feeding into it, but larger system. And so this particular assignment asks you to write a paper that summarizes the cultural dilemma. What's the issue? What's that debate? What is dividing someone? What makes it difficult to decide what to do here? And how is that arising out of the culture? And to specifically summarize the negotiation styles and cultures that are involved. Now, this is going to be an integrative assignment in the sense that there's readings from this module and previous assignments in the course that you should be leveraging here. to talk about the dynamics and the dilemma, and in part, how to resolve it. Now, the assignment instructions give a fairly detailed description of what should be written about in what order, because it says, okay, start with an introduction that says, what will the reader find in your paper? Basically, it's asking for an outline paragraph. What is this paper about? What will you discuss? So, introduce a case study, give us a short version of what's at stake, what the problem or dilemma is, who are the people involved. And then, in 5 following sections, first, what should Scott do and why? And not just give your opinion, but give your professional opinion backed by the assigned readings. What are the long and short-term consequences of signing or not signing the endorsement? So this should be more than just 1 or 2 sentences. This should be at least a paragraph, probably somewhere around a page, given the length of this assignment. What is this dispute about from Scott for Mr. Honda? Now, this is a great question to ask about, because what people are actually disputing, or what the stakes are for them, can be very different. Whether we're looking at conflict in a relationship, the romantic relationship or a marriage, conflict at a workplace, or a conflict between acquaintances and friends. I've been fortunate enough to live in a couple countries around the world, and sometimes you find that people are very passionate about things, not because it is very important to you, but because, for whatever reason, it's very important to them. And vice versa. There are times when I've said, no, it's the principle of the matter. I don't care about the money. And in this case, there may be things that are huge for Scott that are not, or would not otherwise be important to Mr. Honda, and vice versa. And then from this, after outlining what this dispute is for each person, now you're asked to explain the cultural differences between the two parties. And this is the point where there's some trickiness in the writing that we'll talk about later, because it's awfully tempting to make overgeneralizations, and I think that the overgeneralizations tend not to serve people when you're trying to resolve a specific conflict. They might be helpful to keep in mind as a general thing, but these are individuals here, and saying, oh, you people do X is usually not a helpful way to resolve something. So what are the possible options to resolve this? And there's a clarifying note here that you should be not only supporting your response with material from your assigned readings and the course material in general, but you can also bring in outside academic sources. And then a paper a conclusion, which is probably going to be 1 or 2 paragraphs, where you summarize the main themes of the paper and advocate for your work. What could a conflict resolution specialist or a conflict manager do in this situation to help bring the parties to a more agreeable outcome than the current dilemma? Now, if we look at the paper specifications, we see that this is going to be roughly 4 to 6 pages of body text. So that's not counting the title page, not counting the references. So since a double-spaced 12-point font page is roughly 250 words, so that, again, 4 to 6 pages. And you are asked to include the word count on the title page. That's what we call a house rule. It's not something that's specified in APA style, but you can certainly add because your professor has asked for that. You should be including the prompt with your answer. And the easiest way to do that is by including as a heading. And you're specifically told not to quote your sources. So paraphrase, summarize, cite, reference them, and of course format the paper using APA standards. Now, if we look at this outline here, we get some clues about the relative length for this paper. You can see that the introduction and the conclusion are only 5 points each, so those should be shorter. You can see that the analyze both long and short-term consequences, that is 10 points versus the 15 points for addressed Scott's best option, discussed the cultural differences between the two parties, examined case from the perspective of each party, and also getting 10 points is to examine the possible solutions in the conflict. And we see that there's another 5 points each for is this the appropriate length, doing APA style, and then also is it written well. Now, do take a note of that papers without citations and a reference page will be returned for a rewrite with deductions taken for late submission. This should be an argument that is backed by references, by citations for specific points, and then a reference sheet for looking up those things. Okay, so let's go ahead and now talk about how some of this might start with the outlining and drafting phase, because that'll be our window for talking about some of these intercultural communication things and introducing certain phrasing. And I'll refer back to this later, but some core strategies when addressing an intercultural issue like this. First, to acknowledge differences. Another way to say that is to frame a statement. Rather than say, oh, you do this, or you were wrong. Oh, I see that this is very important for you, and I realize that coming from this other culture, this is not something that is important to me. That is a way of framing a statement. Also, to understand cultural tendencies. For example, there are some cultures where being loud is a good thing, and others where it's not. And so you may, by practicing the values of one, unintentionally cause offense. Now, while culture gives us some ideas, you don't want to reduce people just to culture, because there's a lot of variation within societies, and saying, oh, you people or everyone from this believes that is something that can be considered a little dehumanizing because you're not focusing on the individual. So avoid generalizations and taken too far, and try and ground in, oh, someone said this, or these are some common attributes, rather than saying everyone has this, for example. And ultimately find a middle ground, to find something that lets both parties be at least somewhat happy, to say, okay, I got something, and rather than, oh, I just lost. Finding a middle ground is always a good strategy. Now, if we're talking searching for some literature, as we'll apply this in the outline in a moment, 2 points I'd recommend starting. One is the ACU Distance Education portal, where you can do some searches tied in with the ACU library. And for those who prefer a more streamlined interface and to find what they're looking for and then retrieve that from the ACU library, you might use a tool like Google Scholar. But I think after we talk through it, you'll agree that ACU OneSearch has some very strong advantages. So we'll come back to this in a moment, but a good point for outlining this assignment, especially because it's late in the term and there's strong expectations for writing quality and organization, is to start with the instructions, taking them and adding headings for each part of the assignment's prompts. So let's go ahead and grab a copy of our course paper template. Alright, so I have a blank copy of our APA course paper template here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is now, the title does not need to be fancy, it should be descriptive and reasonably concise. And beyond that, you can always improve the title later. We want something that will help us focus the paper and get started. Then you can move on from there. Now, since the assignment instructions do say that you should include the word count on the title page, let's go ahead and add that here. And there are a couple places. Some people put it in the upper right or left hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and put it here. And to help make sure that I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that. That way I have this bright reminder that I'm supposed to fill that in. And in fact, I'm also going to go ahead and add a comment here saying, fill this in before submitting. Alright, so now I've got a double reminder to do that, because I don't want to lose any points there. And I can go ahead and take my title and add it there, the problem with 500 English sentences. And now I'm going to start by pasting the outline here. And because of the nature of this, I'm going to go ahead and start adding headings here, because the instructions do say I should include them. So, alright. Now, because you don't normally have a question in a heading in APA style, we're going to go ahead and format that entitled case and put a APA level 1 style tag here. So now it's bolded and centered, and now it's a statement about the contents here. Consequences of signing and not signing. Yeah, you can have other headings here, but again, we want to go with accuracy first. And you could even break this down to make sure that you are delineating it. And so here we'd use an APA level 2 heading. And then we can break this up. And here you could even just take this text here. And let's start by making it an APA level 1 heading. And then we can go ahead and change the capitalization, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. If the prompt gives you all the information you need to construct a helpful and specific heading, then let's do that. Same thing with here. Possible options to resolve this conflict. Alright, APA level 1. Go ahead and add the title case. Now we have just one more here at the conclusion. So we'll add a heading for that as well. Alright, now let's start with this. This is going to involve an outline here, okay. And so now that we have headings, you have a good idea of how to list those. So you want to have tell us who's involved, what are the stakes, what's the conflict, and you might find out the things that you want to add there. But if we're planning this out, the introduction should be fairly short, probably just one paragraph. And looking at the rubric here, we see, okay, best option, okay, 15 rather than 10, so that's probably going to be longer. Well, let's see, we have 5 major body sections, we have got roughly 5 pages, so that's probably going to be 1 to 2 paragraphs for analyze both. Scott's best option is probably 2 to 3 paragraphs. Now, this is just a guess, but it's something that will help us move forward with planning out how much detail you need. This is probably going to be 2, unless you're going to be having a compare and contrast paragraph separately. Possible options to resolve. Alright, so we've looked at this, and now let's talk about the research here, because that may be something that you are leveraging. So this is a good point for us to go look at the electronic calendar. Alright, so I'm at the ACU distance learning portal, and this search box at the top will take me to the library catalog to look for some related literature. So I've decided I'm going to search for peer-reviewed literature, and I'm going to specifically look for American and Japanese cultural expectations and see what I get to start. Now, right at the top, I see that we have an awful lot of sources here, 152,000. And whenever I see so many, I think, okay, let me try and be more specific about what I want. So in this case, I'm going to look only at full text stuff, things I can look at right now without having to send away for them. That's still most of them. We have 141,000. Want to have recent literature. So let's go ahead and I'm going to say, let's look for stuff that's from, the last 5 years or so. And then see, do I still have a lot of results here? I do. Great. Awesome. And so now we're going to take a look and see what we have here. And, learning through academic collaborations. Okay, that might be helpful. Contradictions in intercultural telecollaboration. Okay, great. Now, you will be able to look through these and select what is most helpful to you if you are looking for a outside source to use. But a good place is to start looking at the description or the abstract and see, is this the sort of thing you're interested in before you go and read the whole article? And that will help you screen out early whether that's something you think is worth spending more time on or whether you should move on. But let's say this is one that we decide to pick. So there's a PDF full text link here, and then we can grab a citation here through the cite tool there. And you can see we scroll down, and past AMA, which is American Medical Association, we have APA 7th edition. Now this isn't perfect, but it's a huge time saver. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this, and then we're going to go ahead and go to our Word document and look in the references section and go ahead and paste it in there. And you'll see it doesn't quite look right. We've got that highlighting that we don't want. So select Match Destination Formatting. And now it looks mostly the way, but we want this to be a reference. So in the Styles pane here, we'll go ahead and select this text here and select APA Reference. Now, it does have the hanging indent we need, and although not all the capitalization is quite right, we can fix that pretty quickly. So you see I've selected this text here. I can go up here and select lowercase to turn that quickly into lowercase. We'll get rid of that extra space. And then intercultural telecollaboration, we also want to be lowercase. Now, let's look at a way that this might come up, or another similar article. So if we go back to look at this, and go to the PDF full text, let's say I am reading through this, and I find some stuff that supports what I want to be describing here. Now, here it's talking about use value and exchange value. Okay, so as we are looking into this, we find a detail that is relevant to what we want. Now, you want to read the actual articles. I'm just giving an illustrative example here. Now, here we have talking about some homestays here, and that there are these students who had a significant interest in Japanese, but also there was some worry about the collaboration. So let's say we're working this into our outline here. So we've got those authors here. All right. So we're looking at this, and so okay, what are the cultural differences? And so when we're talking about this, you might have a point like cultural differences between Americans and Japanese, or we could even condense this. Japanese, American. Now, you don't want to use a phrasing that has an unintentional wording. So if you look at this, you say, okay, we have Japanese American, which could be construed as, oh, someone who is of Japanese heritage, but also American. So maybe not hyphenated or not hyphenated this way. So we can say, okay, let's go back to cultural differences between Americans and Japanese, and let's say, let's make it equal, so both adjective forms. So cultural differences between, say, American and Japanese workers in business settings are not unusual. For example, and now we have our authors here. And then you talk about whatever it was from the article that you were using as the supporting example. And so rather than that being just a claim about there being these cultural differences, you're saying, okay, here's someone documenting that. And you might include things about what they suggested, things about what they said not to do, or things where they said, okay, this is a common point of friction, as opposed to saying, these people are just like that. Now, if we were to look through this a little bit more, we'd find a couple more examples here where we have different things that are being identified here. And here it's talking about a contradiction in a system, which then causes problems with other people. So this is a particular sort of conflict. And in fact, it even references some different societal valuations. So for example, in Japan, it's more likely that people will learn English than it is in the United States that Americans would learn Japanese. And so this is one of those things that can also set up certain power dynamics. So if you're talking about this, you can bring up other examples and also ground it in the literature here. Now let's look at another example here for illustrative purposes. So let's say you were going through here and you're searching for different literature related to what you are talking about, and we find, okay, personal cultural orientations on vulnerable consumers. Okay, that might be of general interest, but probably not for this specific case study. Now we have, individualism versus collectivism. This is something with some potential bearings here. So again, I can go ahead and read the abstract first and see, does this seem to align? And so this is talking about collectivism, and we find that, this is actually goes against some of the common stereotypes. So I think that's a great topic for discussion. And so if I decide that I'm selecting it, okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab the information for my references. I look at this and see, okay, there's a little bit of reformatting, but it'll still save me a lot of time to copy this. So back to my references. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to match the destination formatting. Now I need to go ahead and abbreviate this so it follows APA style. Change that to lowercase. Oops. Lowercase, not uppercase. And we'll just replace this with the current formatting for a DOI. There, we have our second source here that you're going to be using. And all right, Takano and Aiko 2018. All right. And if you're making a claim that they should not do something that might go against the common wisdom or what one source says, and then you can talk about that in more detail. And so one of the things this is doing is calling attention to, okay, cultures are not monolithic and there may be assumptions on both parts, including that, for example, one won't bend or one won't adjust. So keep that in mind as you are writing this. Part of it is to show that you have an understanding of the nuances of the situation and how to pay attention to those nuances in finding a solution. Now, we don't have time to go into things further, but I do strongly recommend, if you are having trouble finding literature for what you want, go ahead and use the Ask a Librarian button, or if you're here during business hours, the chat with us. You can talk directly with a ACU librarian and get some help on your search. With that, let us wrap things up here. And if you're having any trouble structuring your paragraphs, just bring up the no tears plan and start with, give us the one-sentence version of what are you advising, or what are you suggesting be done, or what's your insight into the situation. Tell us why, what's your basis for saying that, your evidence, analysis. So if you find one of your sources is a guide for, okay, if you're working in this country, do this, well, that may be part of what you're saying. Well, this is a guide for this, it's been used a lot, so therefore. And make sure to format things correctly. That is one of the things you're being graded on. Don't forget that word count. And if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. Schedule an appointment to sign up for feedback. And with that, I bid you good night.